Hey guys, welcome back to Gideon Stuff, and welcome back to a new series I'm thinking about starting. I don't know what I'm going to call this series yet. You would think that is something that I would plan out before sitting down to film a video in said series, but you would be wrong. It's going to be something like brand review or my thoughts on a brand, something like that. But basically what the idea behind these videos is I'm going to give my thoughts and experiences with a knife company as a whole. Right, I get asked all the time, Gideon, what are your thoughts on this knife? What are your thoughts on that knife? But I also frequently get asked, hey Gideon, what are your thoughts on this brand? What do you think about Civivi? What do you think about Artisan? And you know what? I think it'd be great to have a video that I can just point people to. Hey, this is what I feel about this brand as a whole. And today's topic of discussion is Gerber. And I think this is a good brand to start with because I think it's a pretty well-known brand, even among people that aren't necessarily knife people. And also, Gerber has just been on my mind a lot recently. You may have seen my recent unboxing and first impressions of this little knife here. This is the Gerber Mini Sada. And so I've been carrying this knife, getting ready for the review, and yeah, that has been a little bit of a misadventure, let's just say. So I have a few Gerbers out here. I think these are all the Gerbers I have in my possession right now. I've owned more in the past. There might be a couple in some boxes buried somewhere that I don't care to dig out. But we're going to talk about these knives. We're going to go through my history with the brand and just my experiences with their quality, customer service, if I have any experience with that, and you know, just talk about my overall thoughts. So my Gerber story starts a long time ago. I've known about Gerber for a while. I've been carrying and using Gerbers for a while. This right here is a Gerber mini paraframe. And this is a knife that I was given when I was 12 by my dad. And it's a very weird little knife. The paraframe is kind of, in a lot of ways, Gerber's flagship model. This little knife here, I'm not going to say this is a great knife because it's really not. But I did use the snot out of this knife, cutting hay strings and things for my chores. The edge on this thing is actually really tore up, if you can see that. And that's from just cutting. Hay strings are really abrasive on knife blades, and this is like 5CR steel. It did not hold up very well. I would sharpen this a lot when I was a kid, and I wasn't the best at sharpening, but yeah, the lock bar doesn't quite engage all the way anymore. You gotta kind of push it over again. So obviously, despite this not being a very good knife, it's a sentimental knife for me because my dad gave it to me, and I've got a lot of good memories with this knife. But the paraframe is, in a lot of ways, Gerber's flagship model. This is probably one of, I would guess, one of their best-selling knives. Probably one of the best-selling knives on the planet, which is tragic to think about. This is not a great knife. However, I don't think it's quite as bad as a lot of knife enthusiasts make it seem. Like, this is not a good knife at all. But if you're someone who's not necessarily looking for quality in your tool, I can see the appeal behind this knife. It's easy to use, very easy to sharpen, and it technically works as a knife. And honestly, the ergos on this thing aren't terrible. They're not great, but they're not terrible. And so I definitely see why this knife is popular. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with it, but I see why it's popular. My next big experience with Gerber comes with this knife, the flat iron. This knife is also really sentimental to me because this is one of the knives that kind of got me into the hobby. When I graduated high school, I decided I wanted to buy myself a couple of high quality knives, a couple of good knives. So I went to a local feed store and I had my eye on the flat iron and the CRKT fossil for quite some time, and I bought them both. And I think I think this knife ran me close to $50, which I way overpaid. But this was a knife that was just really interesting to me. I never really seen anything like this. It's very unique in profile. It's got a pretty weird clip for me at the time. It's got this little plate here. And I got this knife, and I had the Fossil, and there was just something different about them. Like the Fossil felt way more high quality. Now this did feel a little more high quality than some of the knives I've been carrying up to that point, but I noticed a difference between the CRKT and the Gerber, and that led me down the YouTube knife content rabbit hole. I started watching knife reviewers and stuff like Nick Shabazz, Metal Complex, Doc P 190B. Is that his name? I think so. Doc P 91B, whatever it is. You guys know who I'm talking about. And I saw their reviews on this knife, and so that kind of got me interested in the world of knives, and honestly led to the creation of this YouTube channel. Now this knife is not great. This is one of the original ones with the G10 scale. By the way, that blue smudge, that is from, I wore this with my blue jeans and they just bled onto the tan G10. 7CR blade. Mine has significant lock rock, which is really concerning because we're at like 100% lockup. But I carried this knife a lot. I did, and I used the snot out of it. My favorite story to tell with this knife is one time, again, I'm a freshman in college, and I'm getting back after some exams. I went and ate some food and come back to my dorm, and my dorm mate was not home. But I had been to my dorm, sat down after a class, typed something up, then gone to eat and do whatever else I had to do that evening. But when I stood up, my key ring had gotten caught in my chair and got ripped off my pants. And I didn't realize that until I got back to my dorm and realized I don't have my keys. How am I going to get into my dorm? And what I ended up doing was using the flat iron as like a screwdriver to take the screws out of the window frame, and then use it like a pry bar to pop the window out, set it on the ground, jump through my window, get my keys and everything. So I think that's a fun story. So obviously this is a knife that's never going anywhere. But later on I did upgrade. In fact, one of my very first unboxing videos on the channel was of this knife. This is an upgraded flat iron with D2 blue micarta. And this is a much better knife. I wouldn't say this is a great knife. The action is much better. Ouch, I just about cut my thumb off. It looks a lot better. I really like the shininess. I like this kind of matte gray on the frame. It looks good with the blue. The action, again, is much better. Lockup is solid. This is a much better knife. The materials are better. But I still wouldn't say it's an amazing knife. We do have some lock stick. There's some quirks with this knife. But overall, this is, definitely an upgrade, and I do like this knife quite a bit better than the original one. And then I reviewed this knife on the channel. This was, again, one of my first channel reviews. I hate this knife. This is the Gerber Asada. Absolutely hate this knife. This knife is terrible. The action is not that great, although I have tinkered with it over the years and made the action a little bit better. The access to the lock bar is the worst I've ever seen. That lock bar is so sharp. It's just atrocious. Not a great knife. And of course we have this guy. I reviewed this knife recently, which actually really impressed me. This is the Gerber fullback. And my last Gerber is my Gerber strong arm. And this is a knife that I actually carried. This was the belt knife I carried predominantly when I was doing field camp for my geology degree, which I think is really, really cool. So got some good memories with that knife. But what do I think of Gerber as a whole? I'm gonna sum up my thoughts on Gerber with an analogy. We're gonna compare Gerber to a girl. A girl you meet at a bar. You see her, she catches your attention. She's pretty, she's got nice eyes. You go and you talk to her and she seems pretty cool. And you think to yourself, this could work out. I like this. Well, things go well that night, you take her home, but the next morning you wake up, you're like, huh, no, that wasn't it. That wasn't it. That wasn't good. That was not very good. I don't think I'm going to do that again. And so you part ways. But then a few months later, your phone buzzes, you look, it's a message from that girl. It says, hey, I'm in your area, we should hang out. And your first instinct is like, no, I don't really want to. I remember last time wasn't that great. But then you think to yourself, I am going through a little bit of a dry spell. It's been a while since I've had any. Yeah, why not? And again, the next morning you wake up and you say, yeah, that wasn't good. That wasn't good at all. That's how I feel about Gerber. So many times I'll see a Gerber knife and I'm like, that looks very interesting. I want to try that. I want Gerber to be good. Same thing with this mini Sada. I saw this in a little outdoor goods store and I thought, that looks interesting. It's been a while since I've tried Gerber. Actually, this was the first knife I've bought in months. I was like, hey, you know what? Let's get that for the channel. Let's buy me a new knife. Let's see what this is about. This could be fun. And it hasn't really been that fun. It has not been that fun. I've been putting way more work into making this knife functional than I should. And it's getting better. And I will say there are a lot of things about this design that I like, but it's not great by a long shot. Gerber consistently disappoints with both their choice of materials and their execution. Gerber uses some pretty terrible materials, right? The 7CR steel on this, that's a steel they use a lot, is not good. It's really not good. However, that in and of itself isn't necessarily a deal breaker. I like to think, like Buck uses a lot of 7CR. CRKT uses a lot of materials. They're getting better, but they used to use a lot of materials that were subpar. However, Buck was giving you a lot of reliability with their tools, a good warranty, all this, that, and the other. CRKT would give you just wild and wacky designs that you're getting, basically custom designs at production prices. And so even though the materials weren't the best, they're giving you a little bit in the sense of, hey, have you ever wanted to own a Michael Walker design? Here you go. You can have one for $50. Gerber doesn't really have that. And the other thing too is like I said, with the Buck, they're giving you like good build quality. CRKT will give you decent build quality. Gerber really doesn't. They really don't give you much of anything, which is really, really disappointing because Gerber used to be one of the premier USA-made knife brands, right? You think classic USA brands, knife brands. What come to mind? For me, 3 brands immediately come to mind. Well, maybe 4. Case, Camillus, Gerber, and K-Bar. Maybe we'll go K-Bar. A lot of those brands kind of fell off in years, right? Camillus, I love Camillus, but they're not USA made. Gerber, they do some USA, some not. But they fail to innovate. Now, I like to think that I'm a pretty simple guy when it comes to the knives that I use and carry. It doesn't take much to please me, right? If your knife is functional, I'll appreciate it as functionality. If it's a wacky design, I can appreciate the artistry in that. Gerber lacks both. Now, I mentioned this knife. I reviewed this recently. You should check that video out. It's a really, really neat one. This is the Gerber fullback, and this is a hideous little knife. And in a lot of ways, this is a knife that I would not be into at all. And it has a lot of things that aren't very enthusiast-friendly. Tip-down pocket clip. It's assisted. The materials suck. Plastic, 7CR. But I really like this knife. Really like this knife. And I was thinking to myself, why? I should not like this knife on paper. It's a Gerber. The materials kind of suck. It's not really my style. It's ugly. But I realized what I liked about it was, number one, it's unique, right? This is a very, very unique looking knife. But number two, it's just functional. It works the way it's supposed to. I mean, the lockup is nice and solid. The blade cuts really well. It's a hollow grind. It's stout yet slicey. Good for utility cuts. It felt like a knife. And so many other Gerbers I haven't enjoyed just because they take what little potential they had and throw it out the window. This knife here, I think this looks really cool. We've got this awesome kind of like clip point kind of cleaver blade. We have this massive finger choil here. You know, this looks like a knife that could be very functional as well as aesthetically pleasing. But they ruin all of that. Number one, the ergonomics on this knife really, really suck. It's very sharp. That lock bar is an absolute killer. It's like, okay, so what? It's not comfortable as a user knife. What about as an art piece? Well, I think even as an art piece, as a knife that you like enjoy, it doesn't have that because the action's terrible. And honestly, there's not enough going on to make it feel special. But this has a few things that I really like about Gerber. And one is their little pinch plate thing here. I said Gerber doesn't innovate. That's not entirely true. I'm being a little bit mean. Gerber does a few things that I do actually like. Their pinch plate here on their frame locks, I think, is actually a really neat innovation. When I did the unboxing of this knife, I said something along the lines of Gerber's not even trying. They don't even, they're just throwing the same stuff. And after reflection, there has been improvement. Between this knife and this knife, there is actually a lot of improvement. I think there's a lot of quality changes. For one thing, the texturing in the middle of this little plate here is basically non-existent. You can barely even see it. This little aluminum plate has really nice texturing, matches the front scale, very, very nicely textured. The aluminum scale here too is just a little more sophisticated. It's got more milling going on. It's a little more aesthetically pleasing than just this flat slab. And they did technically try to do something new with their little pivot adjust system. However, it's a terrible, terrible system. Absolutely terrible. Soft hardware. I tried disassembling this knife. You'll see that in the full review. It just would not disassemble. And so I can tell that Gerber was trying with this, but something's not working. I don't know what it is. At this point, so many companies are figuring out what it takes to make a good budget knife. It's really not that hard. If you have a good design and you execute it well, you can slap a D2 or 14C28N blade between two steel liners and a couple slabs of G10, and it will be generally well accepted. I said in my unboxing of the Mini Sada that Gerber doesn't listen to reviewers, that they don't take any of this advice, that they just keep cranking out the same old thing. And again, I was upset because this knife was kind of crappy out of the box. I can tell that Gerber is making some strides, and they have done things like they started making more of their like the USA made folders, the flat eye, or what is it, the fastball, the Sedulo, which I'm interested in checking out those knives. I can tell they are trying, and from what I hear, those knives are hit or miss. They're not completely nailing it yet. But I think that Gerber is just so far behind. And you hate to say it, again, Gerber there's one of these brands that I really, really want to succeed. I want to see Gerber do well. But as it is, I do not recommend Gerber knives to anyone. In fact, I tell people to stay away from Gerber. A knife that I reviewed recently that I still see in stores like Home Depot, Walmart, is the Gerber Swagger, selling for like 40 bucks. I reviewed the Gerber Swagger. I made a lot of videos about it. You can go check those out. That is an absolutely terrible knife. Terrible knife. Awful. I cannot tell you how bad that knife is. The lock rock, the unsecure lockup, the crappy materials, the sharpening was absolutely atrocious. The pocket clip sucks. It's just a bad, bad knife, and people are charging 40 bucks for it. But I guess you can't blame Gerber because some idiots are going out and buying those knives. And that kind of brings me to why I think Gerber is stuck in the past. Because people are still buying them, right? So Gerber is owned by Fiskars now, and I think that unholy alliance has allowed Gerber knives to really be flooded into a lot of these stores I was mentioning, your Walmarts, your various hardware stores, Ace, Home Depot, you name it. They're getting a lot of these Gerber knives. And so you're a guy who's, maybe you're at Home Depot looking for some 2x4s. You're building something. And you're walking down the tool aisle and you see some knives. You're like, you know what? I need a new pocket knife. It's been a while. You're looking around and you see a Gerber. And you might have a little ring in the back of your head. Oh, my grandpa carried a Gerber and he loved it. And wow, look, this Gerber is $52. That's a lot of money for a knife. I'm going to buy that. And I know a lot of people who are absolutely not knife people who have been disgusted by their Gerber purchases. But I know other people too who have bought Gerber knives and they think they're great, they swear by them, and then I'll give them something better and they're like, wow, I had no idea what I was missing out on. I'm going to tell you a story about a friend of mine. He had a Gerber knife. I can't remember what kind it was, and it was a piece of trash, but he was always talking big game about this knife. We'd be sitting around talking. Of course, he knew I had this knife channel. He'd always ask to see what knife I was carrying, and I'd show him. He'd be like, huh, you know, that's fancy and all, but it's never going to beat my Gerber. For his birthday, I got him a Sin Cut. And he absolutely fell in love. And he even apologized to me. He's like, oh my goodness. He said, you're right. I'm using this knife and it blows my Gerber out of the water. How much was this? $40. And he couldn't believe it. And I feel like that is, to me, that's a dark side of the knife industry that I really try my best to expose in my series like Cheap Knife Week, because there's a lot of companies, not just Gerber, but there are a lot of companies, and a lot of companies way worse than Gerber, who are just selling crap to people who don't know any better. And unfortunately, a lot of people that are buying these knives, it's not like it's, you know, teenage mall ninjas just trying to build a knife collection. It's genuine, hardworking, blue-collar guys who are relying on these knives to get specific tasks done, and they're buying crappy knives. And I hate that. I hate that. And again, I think Gerber is trying to, in some ways, modernize. They're trying to kind of step into the future. They're trying to catch up to everyone else. And I don't think they're necessarily doing the best job of it. And one thing they could really fix is their pricing. Their pricing is just atrocious. I was saying, I don't recommend Gerber to anyone. The best Gerber knife that I own, and a Gerber knife that I think is actually a legitimately good knife, is the Strong Arm. This is a knife that I have beat the crap out of. I have taken this knife in the field with me. I've put my life in the metaphorical hands of this tool, and it's done me solid. This is a knife that I do enjoy. I think this is a good tool. The sheath system is really cool as well. But these are going for like $90, around $90. You know, anywhere between like, I don't know, $75 to $90 if you find them on sale or whatever. And I can't recommend that knife to anyone because of that price. And also, there's just so many knives that I would recommend before that. Cold Steel SRK, right? Go get a Cold Steel SRK. So even when Gerber does make a good product, even when they're like trying to improve, their pricing just isn't competitive at all. And yeah, this is a USA made knife. I get that, you know, the price you got to factor in. The sheath is very modular. There's, you know, price with that as well. But even so, I think Gerber, if they really, really want to be taken seriously, they need to dial their pricing in. This knife here is going for like $45. And maybe mine was a dud. If you have one that was great out of the box, I could see the $45 being worth it. I mean, this is aluminum, steel scales, the D2. That's cool. But like this knife here, I think this was like a $40 knife. 7CR, aluminum, steel, terrible build quality. This should have been like a $25 knife, then it would have been like, okay, maybe. I will say I do like, I don't think there's enough budget frame locks. I like frame locks every once in a while. I think, you know, I applaud Gerber for making budget frame locks. I applaud them for using like aluminum and things. I think that's really, really cool, but they really need to dial in their QC, they really need to dial on their build quality. So, my experiences with Gerbers, I've had positive experiences with Gerbers, but I've had way more negative experiences. And my overall thoughts on this brand, I'm rooting for them, but I never, ever recommend anyone get a Gerber. Ever. They're just so hit and miss, so spotty on their quality, and honestly, they're just being outcompeted by everything that's out there. Even if they have cool designs, which sometimes they do, sometimes they don't really have cool designs, they've got better knives that you can buy for, a fraction of the cost. Go there, right? It's sad. Again, like Gerber's a brand that I want to see doing better, but they're just not. They're just not. They need to make huge, huge strides. And I think they've been dragging their feet. As a viewer of mine said in a recent comment on a Gerber video, Gerber needs to stick to making baby food. And I love that. I love that. And I agree full-heartedly. Gerber just, as of right now, as of June of 2024, I cannot recommend Gerber in any situation whatsoever. So there's my thoughts on the brand Gerber. Thank you so much for watching. Big shout out to my channel members here. They do a lot for the channel. In fact, Old Tonto Guy sent this knife to the channel for me to review and take a look at. So I really, really appreciate that. If you want to be a member, there's a button down below. You get access to member exclusive giveaways and early access to videos and all kinds of cool stuff. But yeah, that's gonna be it for today, guys. Again, thank you for watching. If you like this video, leave it a like, comment below, and subscribe. I want to hear, what do you think about Gerber, and what brand do you want to hear my thoughts on next? Until next time, I've been Gideon, and I'll see you later. Why did that outro come out not normal? Anyways, adios.